So welcome to the Integral-European Conference. It's our very last day and it's very exciting, all these contributions which have been made. And today we want to talk, not me, but our presenters, about past lives. Do they exist, and why does it matter? And I'm actually very much interested in that. And I know Viktoria, one of our presenters, and we did work on that. By the way, I'm Hanna Hündorf from the Wisdom Factory, and I also interviewed Hanna and Viktoria on these very interesting topics like past lives and deaths. And before we go into this session, I would like to read you a little bit who they are. Viktoria Duda is a spiritual anthropologist, hypnotherapist, and writer. A series of spiritually transformative experiences prompted her to leave an academic career and pursue independent research about the nature of consciousness. Born in Budapest, she lived in 7 different countries and conducts sessions internationally and online in English, German, and Hungarian. She has a PhD in social anthropology from the University of Vienna and is a member of the British Society of Clinical Hypnosis. And Hanna Hündorf was born 1960 in Germany, and she has been part of the core team of the IEC since its beginning in 2014. And I remember that very well. It was beautiful. She helps develop the content, coordinates the workshops and presentations before and during the event, and is part of the main stage management. And Hanna, you are really doing a great job. I thank you in the name of everybody present. In 1997, after her first retreat, she began translating Buddhist teachers from English to German and intensified her studies of Buddhist philosophy and meditation in Hamburg and Nepal. She also started teaching at that time and began developing her own style of transmitting the traditional teachings and methods in a way that is appropriate to the Western culture, but retains the depth and power. At the same time, she began reading Ken Wilber and adopted the integral view. After her second retreat, 2006, she returned to Germany to look after her mother. She worked in an old people's home for 2 years and nursed her mother for 11 years so that she could grow old peacefully and in dignity and die at home. During that time, Hanna began giving courses and individual coaching sessions. She also became involved in the integral movement in Germany and Europe with a special emphasis on organizing large gatherings as the one you see here. And now she lives with her husband in North Germany. And she has joined his gardening firm and gives coaching sessions. So welcome both of you. I'm looking very, very much forward to hear again about afterlives and deepen my already existing knowledge about that. And you will find their addresses and some podcasts soon in the chat. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I would like to welcome you all really warmly to our session. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to have you here this Sunday morning, or maybe it is a different time in your time zone. And to begin with, I would like to invite you to do a little bit of visualization, a little bit of meditation with me, to arrive at a point where we can open up our minds as well as our hearts to perhaps new ways of thinking. So if you just want to make yourself comfortable for the moment, and if you want, you can also close your eyes. And then just allow yourself a minute or two to do nothing. Just to be here with us. And feel that we are all a group, we are all together, even though we are everywhere in the world. I find that quite miraculous, what just happened in the last few days. That we have now the means that we can be scattered all around the globe. We can be all just sitting in our living rooms. And still we can, like a neurological network, form a connection all over the planet and create a field that we can all feel belongs together. I think that is pretty miraculous. Just an amazing opportunity to create such things in our present 21st century time. And at the same time, you might have also felt the strain that comes with the fact that we've been sitting in front of computer screens for days and days on end, tiring our eyes and our spines. So let's just use this moment to let go of any tension that you may have felt or you may be feeling. Just take a deep breath in. That's right. And as you're breathing out, just allow yourself to let go of all unnecessary nervous tension in your body and on your mind. And just allow yourself to be in a moment of calm. And you can feel the outside world all around you. And you may be picking up sounds and noises from your environment, from the computer, from outside. And that is quite all right. Now the outside world is still going to go on and on out there. Sometimes it's so fast and busy, I like to think of it as a tornado. All these issues, things just going on and on, round and round, faster and faster, busier and busier. But we are right now in the eye, in the middle of the tornado, where everything is always peaceful and quiet. Just let yourself arrive at that point inside of you, in your heart, the center of your consciousness, where everything is always peaceful and quiet. That's right. And all you have to do right now is just listen to the sound of my voice. And you will notice that the more you are listening to the sound of my voice, the more peaceful and quiet you're becoming. And it is with the sound of my voice that I'm inviting you onto a journey today, to explore things that are unknown, things that can tell us a lot more about why we exist, where we are coming from, and where we are going. And in order to do that, to take you onto that journey, in a moment's time, I am going to begin to count slowly from 10 to 0. And while I'm counting, I'm asking you to use the power of your imagination to create a path that you can be walking down that leads you to a lake. And I don't know how your path is going to look like, and I don't know how your lake is going to look like, because it is going to be your imagination that is creating it. But I just know that it's going to be a peaceful, beautiful place. And that lake has a secret. And when we get there, I will tell you about the secret of that lake. But first, let's just go there on the count of 10, 9, 8, and walking all down to our legs. 7, 6, 5, and at the same time you feel more and more relaxed. 4 and 3. You're going deeper and deeper into the depth of your own mind. 3, 2, 1, and 0. That's right, you are now in a deeply, beautifully relaxed state of mind. And in a moment's time, I will say the word now. And as I say the word now, I'm just going to imagine a lake in front of you. Imagine your lake now. That's right. And I promise that when we are at the lake, I will tell you the secret of it. So now it is time. The secret is that this lake is, no matter how it looks like, not filled with water. It's actually quite safe to just walk into it, dive into it, go under it, and you still will be able to breathe. Because this lake is filled with what I like to call the mist of time. I'm inviting you to merge, to go in, to dive into the mist of time. And as you're doing that, as you're beginning to go deeper into the mist of time, you recognize it. Because of course the words mist of time are nothing but metaphoric. They are nothing but labeling something that cannot be labeled. The mist of time is an emptiness. Primordial emptiness that existed before time and space. That existed before the first thought has ever arisen. But it is, as you know, not an empty emptiness. It is an emptiness pregnant with all the possibilities of creation that a mind can come up with. It can bring forth the 10,000 things of creation. Lives upon lives and deaths upon deaths. It can bring forth reality as we know it and beyond. And sometimes, just sometimes, I like to take someone to the other side of that lake, to come out on the other shore and to be at another time, in another life, in another existence, in another identity. And today, what I want to do is talk about those cases and explore what it all means with you. And for that purpose, if you feel comfortable, I'm inviting you to open your eyes again, but still just feel the mist of time all around you, that primordial emptiness. If you want, you can keep your eyes closed and just listen to the sound of my voice. And just listen to the thoughts that I want to share with you about adventures beyond the lake. So thank you so much for following my visual guidance. I would like to begin by saying that it is not just in a hypnotic regression that people can get into a place in their mind where they seemingly come up with memories that appear to be from a past existence. But it can happen in any other practice. It can happen in all spiritual or psychological practices that are deep enough that they can allow the practitioner to get in touch with their unconscious and or with their transrational higher understanding. So it can be basically in any altered state of consciousness. It can be in holotropic breathing, in different uses of psychedelics, sacred plants, sacred mushrooms, or just a profound long meditation practice that people come up with something that they personally feel belongs to them, but it belongs to them from a time before they were born. And I may also add that these experiences come up also in religion, not just in Hinduism and in Buddhism that have as a central tenet the idea of reincarnation, but virtually all major religions tend to have a core, an esoteric type of teaching that includes some idea of reincarnation. In Islam, if you think of Sufism, or in Christianity of Gnosticism, even in Judaism, it has been shown today that there is a core of teaching that is preserved not for the average practitioner, but for those who want to dwell really deep into the human nature that contains reincarnational thought. So my question to us today is, what do we make out of these experiences? In my experience, people tend to react to the idea of reincarnation in two pretty much diametrically opposed forms. Either they are believers in it and they say, I had those experiences, I know the phenomenon, I don't need to study it further, it's just something that is a given, that is part of my reality, and I can work with it. Most past life regression therapists fall into this group, for example. And then there is the diametrically opposed group who say, this cannot be proven. This is not something that is accessible to scientific understanding, so I better leave my hands off it. Most academic or school psychologists today fall into that group that just put the issue away from their table because they don't want to harm their reputation or their academic thinking by studying something that neither can be verified nor falsified. And I find both positions to be rather unfortunate for the reasons that they actually both root in belief as opposed to thorough investigation. And I understand why there isn't so much thorough investigation into this topic, because it's notoriously difficult to investigate it. But at the same time, there are two main reasons why I found personally and professionally that there is a need to investigate the phenomenon of past lives. The first reason was that clients who experience past lives, they find it personally very important. They sometimes find it part of their biography, just as they would find something that happened in their childhood as part of their biography. So by not taking these experiences seriously would be a thorough devastation of the reality, as Ken Wilber said this conference. It would take away something that is important and personally meaningful to them, just in the same way as all other personal experiences. They are very meaningful to the individual, so we better work with them. The second reason why I think it's worthy of investigation is because there is a sort of proof out there, suggestive evidence, if you might call it, for the actual existence of past lives. And I'm referring here to the cases that scholars such as Ian Stevenson, Jim Tucker, Erland O'Hartson had conducted into the lives of children who spontaneously remember past lives. And for reasons of time, I can't go deeper into presenting these cases to you, but I encourage you, if you're not familiar and interested in the matter, to study these cases. They can be boring to study because they are literally thousands upon thousands of pages where toddlers come up with details that can be verified about past existences. There is something that, when you go deeper into these cases, cannot be ignored. So if we want to stay true to empiric or suggestive evidence, we have to do something with this. I'm just getting a question whether I could put these names in the chat, and I will do that afterwards. Definitely, I will share all the references with you. So for now, my thought is that it would be lovely to investigate, but it's not very easy. If you are familiar with psychology of memory, you know that even memory in the present life is a very hard to deal with subject. If you look at forensic psychology, Elizabeth Loftus has conducted famously experiments like that. You know that even childhood experiences cannot really be verified in any of this. In other words, if someone has a false memory that's been implanted into them that they personally believe is true, and they are talking about these false memories to a therapist, to a psychologist, then the therapist or the psychologist has absolutely no way to tell whether these memories are real or false unless they go and verify the facts. And the same thing applies for past life memories. If we don't go and travel the world and try to investigate objective facts, there is absolutely no way to say where these memories belong. So the question of falsifiability and verifiability is basically falling away. It's becoming impossible. So what do we do? And this is the point in the logical investigation that I find very important and very overlooked. And I'm referring here to the methodology, to the epistemology of how we study transpersonal phenomena. And I want to refer back to the classic book that many of you might be familiar with, Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions, where he is reminding us that every science, also our current mainstream science, is working with certain assumptions. So while things need to be falsified or verified in the scientific discussion, but science itself is working with assumptions that ultimately cannot be proven. So our mainstream science works with the assumption that the world is based on matter. We have atoms, we have molecules, we have cells, we have organs, and they form a chain of being that is ultimately based on material fundaments. And these assumptions, this assumption has been proven very useful when we study the physical world. If we want to build a bridge, for instance, then it is very useful that we assume that the bridge is built on atoms, and we can do mathematics and engineering in order to make it safe and sound. And I think that's the reason why this assumption has become almost like a fact in itself, because it was so successful that people adopted it for all sorts of thinking. But what I'm suggesting is that when we study the phenomena of the mind, then the very same assumption is actually bringing us into a cul-de-sac, bringing us into a dead end. Because what can material science really say about the mind? It is treating it as a strange epiphenomenon of the brain and cannot really say anything more. So in order to study these phenomena of the mind, we would need to turn the assumptions around. And we would need to say, what if it is the mind and not the matter that is the ultimate building block of reality? And we know this assumption from the wisdom traditions, but it's interesting to keep in mind that great 20th century and 21st century scientists have adopted the same view. I'm thinking of Schrödinger, Max Planck, who were all physicists and the Nobel laureate range, who have spoken this out loud and clearly. Schrödinger said word by word that he treats consciousness as fundamental, and he treats matter as derivative of consciousness. So if we have this assumption that we are suddenly in a world of thinking in which we are allowed to investigate phenomena like past lives, but also phenomena that are not considered in the materialist mainstream science. Now, what is very interesting to me when I was using this line of thinking, that it is not new that there can be a science, that there can be a systematic investigation of phenomena that is based on the assumption that it is the mind that is fundamental for reality, and that all matter is derivative of the mind. And I'm referring here to Buddhism, not Buddhism as science, not Buddhism as religion, but Buddhism as mind science. So that's why I'm very excited today to share this presentation with you with Hanna Hündorf, who is a Buddhist student, who's a Buddhist teacher. And I would like to give the word to Hanna now and ask her, what can she tell us about Buddhism as a mind science? What can she tell us about her own Buddhist experience and background? And what would you say, Hanna, is Buddhism teaching us about past lives? Do they regard this phenomena as something useful that is worth studying, that is worth experiencing in order to evolve our consciousness? What is Buddhism's take on this?
Thank you, Viktoria. Thank you for the meditation, the settling into our ground of beings that really helps to listen, be able to listen in a good way. And also thank you for the explanation about your side of things. I find it very fascinating, and how we somehow come from different directions and meet in the middle. The thing, it's good you said that Buddhism isn't a faith as such. It's not a religion. It's actually a mind science. And the Buddha didn't teach reincarnation as something you have to believe in. But the Buddha taught at a time when reincarnation was a given. In the Indian culture at that time, that was what everybody believed in. So he didn't question that. And but he kept telling people to just look at their minds and see what they find, and not believe in what he says just long enough to try it out. And so it was never a problem. That aspect of past and future lives was never a problem in the original countries. And now it's coming to the West, then it's becoming a problem. Then people say, well, do I have to believe in past and future lives? So there's now a widespread of different ways of dealing with that, dealing with this agnostic viewpoint, or this viewpoint where people say, well, I can't follow this. This is ancient. This is not proven, like you said. And there is actually somebody, an English teacher, Buddhist teacher, Stephen Batchelor, that I sometimes recommend to people who find the idea of past lives and karma unbearable. And then I say, well, you don't have to believe in it. If that blocks you from studying your mind, then just don't. Just say, have the agnostic stance of, I don't know. I don't know how it is. I don't remember past lives. If you don't remember past lives. I don't know what was before my birth. I don't even remember my birth. I don't even remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, for that matter. And you can still train, you can still benefit. That's one position, one extreme position. And the old Tibetan masters, they say, unless you believe in past and future lives, you're not really, just going to practice Dharma light. You know, you're just going to use Buddhist meditation and practice to make samsara better, to make this ocean of suffering more comfortable. And to, yeah, which I think probably is also the aim of most psychotherapies, is just to have to fit in better, to have a more comfortable life. And the Buddhist path doesn't start there. In fact, that is a problem, to just always have comfort and disregard, to somehow have aversion against discomfort, and attraction or attachment to comfort is actually the major obstacle. It's the reason why we keep suffering. So my teachers, also my older teachers, they say you absolutely must believe in past and future lives. Otherwise, you're not going to really undergo the hardships, really make the effort to change that, to really look into the true reality, the true reality, and reach this base of our consciousness, of our being, that is not born and will not die. And for me personally, I am also from a Western background, and I've been talking to a lot of people over the last 20 or 38 years, really. So I tend to leave it up to everybody. For me personally, I fall into the first category that you were talking about, that when I finally met Buddhism, luckily at quite a young age, when I was 21, finally I had a theory, or a view that explained the experiences I was having. And I didn't particularly remember past lives, but I have very strong reactions to certain people. And for example, I didn't feel at home in Germany at all. I had struggled with German culture for a long time. And much more comfortable in India or Tibet, where the Asian culture. So for me, it makes sense that I've lived before, and that I have taken along a lot of habits and a lot of ways of being from other existences. And that's why also sometimes I meet a person and we have this deep conversation, and it's like I've always known them. And then I meet another person and I can't stand them. You know, I have this strong adverse reaction. Or sometimes I've known people for years and we've worked together, we've had a lot to do, but there's this distance. I don't know them. They're not really part of my life. So it's, for me, it's a natural explanation. The Buddhist explanation just made a lot of sense. Yeah, so that's all to answer that question.
Thank you, Hanna. It's very exciting to hear things resonating from very old times into the present. There are teachings that are probably thousands of years old, and they resonate with what we are learning at the moment. And one thing I found fascinating from what you said is that the way people look at past lives depends on very much what their purpose is, what their stand in consciousness is. The way people look at past lives depends on where they are at the moment, which makes a lot of sense when we are adopting a mind-based paradigm, because then, of course, reality as we perceive it depends on the mind, on the quality of consciousness. So when we are studying this topic, it becomes apparent, and I'm very happy that I'm right now in an integral community, because this is, I think, exactly the platform where you will all understand the depth and the meaning of that, is that the phenomenon of past lives depends on who's looking at it. So it unfolds in stages, just as any other development. And let me talk a little bit about that, what stages I'm thinking about to bring this issue closer to you. So when somebody first hears about past lives, and when that is somebody who is mainly looking at it from a curiosity point of view, even from an entertainment point of view, they are adopting a stand where it's pretty much implied that there is an ego personality that keeps coming back. Stanislav Grof called it the skin encapsulated ego. And in this stage, people believe that their ego, in some way, their personality keeps coming back. So that is when people say things like, in a past life, I was Cleopatra, or I was Julius Caesar. And it's very much a stage where the value of past lives and past life regressions is not much more than entertainment and showmanship. In some cases, I have to add that is also useful. Even if people are at that stage, there can be certain therapeutic situations when looking into those past lives can cause some healing. And I'm referring to cases when someone has probably a phobia, an unexplained fear, or an unexplained symptom that cannot be helped with in terms of classical traditional medicine. There is a very striking case that is reported in literature where a boy called Ludovic was suffering from a condition in which he couldn't walk straight. He had to use crutches because otherwise he would be always falling over. He was shaking so much in his hands and in his legs that it was impossible for him to move straight. And doctors, because they didn't understand what was going on, just labeled his condition as a minimal brain disorder. And they've done past life regression on this boy. And he remembered under quite dramatic circumstances that he was one of the victims of the Hiroshima atomic attack. And when that memory came back and was worked through, he could walk straight again. I also assume, it's not something that has been studied, but it's something that I would like to present for future studies, that those cases of so-called body integrity identity disorder could have this sort of root and maybe this sort of solution. So those are very bizarre cases some of you might know about, where people are born with a perfectly functioning able body, but they believe that they have to have a disability. And it can be so severe that people are willing to undergo amputations, undergo horrible procedures where they actually, psychologists don't know how to deal with, and they are, there's been a case where a person has been blinded because they didn't know how else to get him out of the suffering. It's very severe. Some people want their spines to be destroyed so that they are paralyzed. It's absolutely dramatic. And there is no school psychology explanation for that. So these are the stages when people are believing that the ego reincarnates. On a little bit higher stage, we can talk about the reincarnation of something like the soul, or an entity that is not the personality, but it still keeps a certain core that goes from one life to the next. And these are the cases where people can work with past issues that we maybe could call karma, when they are exploring their past weaknesses and past strengths. This can be quite useful. I also want to emphasize from a therapeutic point of view that exploring past strengths has brought very good results, because people sometimes forget talents and skills that they could use. And then what we do with them, we do a so-called resource life regression, in which they visit an existence in which they were good at a certain skill, and then they can visit the energy of that and bring it into the present life. Quite similar is the notion of a higher self that reincarnates. So an identity that is transpersonal, that is transcendent, but is linking various existences together. I quite like to work with the higher self concept because it allows people to put their existence into a greater perspective. So the way I like to visualize that and the way I like to talk about that is if you imagine a coordinate system like we used in mathematics in school, or some of you might use it when you are in a more mathematical profession. And if you throw a couple of points into the coordinate system and then you link them together, then you see the curve that is unfolding from those points. And in a similar way, if I take a client and allow him to or her to experience a couple of past lives, we can begin to see a pattern. And it's a pattern that Stan Grof called the condensed experiences, COEX systems, that are themes or issues that may come up in a past life. They may come up also in the present life as a childhood issue, as a dream, as a visionary experience. But when we are collecting these COEX systems of a person, then we realize that they have some common patterns, and those common patterns are leading into a certain future. And then what we need to ask is that the future where the certain individual wants to go? We conduct a so-called future life progression, which is not so much about looking into the crystal ball and find out what the future is, but it is more like finding out where our existence is leading to if we're staying on the course on which we are at the moment. And this is very powerful because people can change if they don't like the way they are heading. And finally, I would just like to share one more stage, which I believe is the most powerful. And it is also, I would say, the integral understanding of this whole issue. It is the understanding that Ken Wilber adopted, is to say, at the end, there is just the knowledge of I am. There is the consciousness that is aware of its own existence.
Viktoria, can you just repeat that sentence? The sound was going.
Yes, so I was saying that there is that level of existence, there's this level of understanding where consciousness knows about itself, I am, but it doesn't have any further content. It identifies with the consciousness it is. We can also say that ultimately there is just one single consciousness in the universe, and that single consciousness is experiencing all those lives that we are historically aware of. So in that sense, it doesn't really make sense to talk about my past lives. It only makes sense to talk about past lives of the cosmic consciousness. And when certain past lives are coming up in, say, my therapy sessions, in my visions, it means that those lives, for whatever reason, are connected to this existence that I'm experiencing right now in the chain of cause and effect, the closest. So that is a very powerful stand, and also that is the stage where shadow work gets on steroids, basically, in therapy. When people are beginning to identify not just with the victim, but they are also beginning and willing to identify with the perpetrator. It's very rare that people get there, and it's very rare that people can hold that stage, but it's one of the most powerful therapeutic stages. So I would ask you, Hanna, what is your experience about different ways to work with the mind. I'm particularly interested in different techniques that maybe Buddhism has to help you work through and work with whatever consciousness experience and to change.
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. But before that, I would love to, if I may, say a few words about my take on karma. What you just said, I found very, very interesting. And I think what is karma is one of the FAQs that I get in my courses. You know, how does karma work? And I think there is a misunderstanding that when people say, oh, that's my karma, they're saying, well, there's nothing I can do about it. And you were just saying about this being a victim, getting out of being a victim. And this is a misunderstanding which I think comes out of Hinduism. And I don't know nothing about Hinduism, but I think there is in the more Hindu belief, it's like karma is a given, and you can just fit in and relax and give all your power to God to sort it out for you. This is probably totally wrong and very simplified. But in Buddhism, the way I understand it and the way it makes sense to me, karma means cause and effect. So everything I experience right now is caused by my actions. Karma, basically the word karma just means action, doing. So whatever I do and think and say creates a pattern, creates an impression. So everything I experience now is created by my thoughts and actions and words in the past. Way since beginningless time. So there's nothing I can do about what's happened in the past, as long as I'm still in this linear way of experiencing time, of course. But actually, when you think about it, the only time I can do something and say something and even think something is right this moment. I can't undo my deeds from the past. I can't unthink the thoughts of the past. And whatever I do in this moment, that will shape the future. So I can very much, the future is not fixed. So my karma of the future, there are certain tendencies. But within the range that I have at my disposal in this moment, there's quite a lot of free will to change my future. So this is, I wanted to say that about karma. And you were just asking me about repeat your question maybe now about techniques.
It's one of the things that I'm very excited about.
Oops.
That,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. The little bit I learned about Buddhism, and it's not nearly as much as you, but I was a young girl and I went to Nepal into the Kopan monastery and we did a 10-day meditation course. And I was blown away by the fact that all the meditations were based on essentially the same techniques as hypnotherapy. It was the same sort of visualization, the same sort of internal representation to bring a new reality into being. It maybe had a little bit more of a religious or ethical flavor, but technically they were the same. So when I do past life or any other hypnotherapeutic sessions with people, I use certain techniques. I give you an example so that you know what I mean. When people go back into a past life, and this will not surprise anyone, they often go through quite horrible experiences. If we look at human history, it quite reads like a horror book. So they may experience scenes of torture, of killings, of war, and you name it. And when that experience arises, we have to work with it. We have to do something to heal those experiences. And one of the techniques that I very much like to use is called getting into the mind of the opponent. Mm-hmm. I give you an example of an actual case where a woman remembered to have been burned as a witch, mm-hmm. and that caused her, even in the present life, to be very passive. She was too scared to start her own healing practice and step into her own power. So when that memory came up, and asking to go into the minds of the opponent meant go find those priests that have done that to her, and did in that enhanced state of mind to ask what was their intention. Mm-hmm. And she was very surprised to learn that they didn't hate her. It was not hunting her as a person, not even as a woman. But those priests at that time really believed she was possessed by the devil, and in order to get that great evil away from humanity, it was a choice of two of lesser evils to kill her. And that allowed her to make peace with the experience. So I'm asking you, what techniques do you know from Buddhism that might be similar to that? I know that you're using similar ones, so it would be nice to make that comparison.
Yeah, thank you. That's another FAQ actually. The most FAQ is, why are there so many different paths of Buddhism? Why are there so many techniques? And why is there Zen Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Vipassana? Which is the right one? You know, or which is the best one? And sometimes I give the image of a big buffet. So Tibetan Buddhism is the most inclusive, or has the largest spread of techniques and spread of views also. It includes all the Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana views and techniques. So sometimes people find that overwhelming. So I would need another 2 hours to, it is said that the Buddha taught 84,000 different techniques and viewpoints. And he did that because there were so many different people with different needs. So he didn't teach them all to everyone, but he always taught, I think personally, individually, or to also sometimes later then large groups of people with specific needs. So dependent on their type, on their stage of development, on their state experience development, he gave them particular techniques. So I think we all start, everybody has to start with mindfulness, becoming aware, becoming present in the present moment. And then you gradually move deeper into no self, you know, getting rid of this clinging to the skin encapsulated ego, I think you called it, by Stan Grof, and then gradually detach from that. And then there are stages of emptiness meditations where you can go all the way, gradually, depending on your capacity. And yeah, so the image I use is Tibetan Buddhism is like a big buffet. So if you're the type of person that takes a plate and then has to take something of every dish on their plate and has a feeling they have to eat it all, then Tibetan Buddhism probably is overwhelming for you. Then you better go with Vipassana and or Zen maybe, or maybe you find a good teacher that tells you, now do that and only that, and keeps checking that you really do it. But if you're like me, that likes to have a lot of choices and likes to have a lot of colors and likes working with visualization, with sound, with physical exercises like prostrations and change technique, have various techniques at your disposal, then it's great. I mean, I love it. The more elaboration, the better. So, but if you find it overwhelming, then within the Tibetan tradition, there's Mahamudra. There are, or like what Dan Brown is teaching, which I highly recommend, is you just go straight to the mind, you know, without any elaboration. So and one technique, what you were just saying about exchanging oneself for others, that's also a technique widely used in Tibetan Buddhism, is where you actually, you detach from yourself, you see your own self viewpoint, and then you change, you dissolve that, and then you change. Then you become the other person and try and see yourself from the other person's point of view, and that can really go a long way towards forgiveness and restoring a good connection, or at least forgiveness, and then with that also peace. And there's one technique you are learning from me or practicing with me now on Tuesdays in German language, which is called Tonglen, which is also widely practiced in the integral circles. However, they often forget that Tonglen is the second step in the Lojong practice, in the mind training practice. And before you actually start taking in the suffering of other beings in form of black smoke and breathing out all your good karma, your good thoughts in the form of white light, if you do that before taking the first step, which is seeing all things as a dream, and seeing the transparent and nature of phenomena, and resting, settling back down to the ground of beings, or the store consciousness. Who was talking about that yesterday? Storehouse consciousness. And you have to first settle into the nature of your mind, which is unborn, which is not personal, and that includes all your experiences of suffering, of whatever. So then, only then you are ready to start taking on the suffering. And also you start with yourself. You start with first taking, if there's any remaining attachment, aversion, fear, any clinging or to things being real, you breathe that in, you open up. So the technique, this technique, it's my favorite. And it's so simple. And you can apply it in any situation, especially when things go wrong, especially when you can't meditate. And you just reverse the normal reaction. Normal reaction is something's pleasant, I want to keep it. Something's unpleasant, I want to push it away. So you just reverse that. When something's unpleasant, you open your heart, you take it in, you breathe it in. And when something's pleasant, you give it away, you let go. So much in a nutshell.
It is fascinating how when you go deeper into the nature of experience and the nature of reality, this dreamlike quality becomes apparent, and the impermanence of the phenomena becomes apparent. And I think these experiences that teach that. For example, when we do past life regressions, we take basically every session the practitioner to the moment of death. And the question that arises is, what is the last thought, what is the last feeling that in that incarnation that particular person had, and how that thought is moving into another form of existence, which is then actually very difficult to grasp in a therapeutic context. But I can't go into that because it would take another hour. But my point is that people through this practice are going over and over and over again on that moment of death. So death is becoming something that is natural, and people always lose their fear of death as a result. So they can see their present experience also from a point of detachment, but that is also a point from which they have better access to change. I once had a client, she told me at the beginning of a session something, said, I wish I could do a past life regression session to this life. And I was like, this is the best idea ever. But we have to do it right now, to just pretend we are coming back from the future into this particular life, and then do the same routine that we always do. We analyze the major events, we analyze the major reactions, and we see what is good in those reactions, what is not so good in those reactions. We build on the strength, we reframe and change the weaknesses, and see where that takes you. And I see there the real power of this sort of practice, that you can step away from your present life at any given moment and see it from a meta perspective. You literally see it from a higher dimension. And it gives you much greater freedom and also much greater strength, I believe, to become your highest possible path in the present moment, as you say. So thank you so much for listening. I believe we have spoken our contributions with Hanna, and you're happy with that, Hanna? We can open the question and answer session.
Wasn't I supposed to also lead a meditation?
I apologize. Yes, because I introed you into a
yes
session, and we said that Hanna is going to lead you out of the session. So I apologize. Yes, please.
Nothing happened. Yeah, yeah. It's actually quite nice. The last words. I haven't planned what to do in this. I would like to lead you also into a little outro. Lead you out of the meditation that we've just our conversation. And I haven't planned what to do. So I would invite you to sit back in a comfortable position. I always recommend, I was also taught by my teachers to keep the eyes open. Either just lowering your gaze, just very relaxed, or you can even look straight ahead or slightly. See where it's comfortable. See where you can just relax, but not block out outer experience, not block out reality. Because if you find your peace of mind only when you have your eyes closed, it's very hard to take that into your daily life. So it's good learning to relax and arrive in a spacious, peaceful state of mind with your eyes open. And then just arrive. Really arrive in your body. Feel your breath. Even though the eyes are open and you still hear sounds, you turn your attention more towards the inner life, your inner experience. And feel the ground under your feet. If there are any tensions in you, then let them flow into the earth with the out-breath. If you feel very excited, usually we either too excited, too much, too many thoughts, too energized, or we feel very tired and almost falling asleep. So we can adjust our posture a little bit and also our attitude. So if you're too excited, then you relax into the ground, feel the heaviness. If you're too heavy already, you tune into this lively life energy inside yourself, this bubbling up like in a glass of champagne, the bubbles, the life energy moving upwards in your body. And that's the energy that helps us be upright, be curious, feel alive and exploring new things, courageous. So somewhere there you find a balance, like a well-tuned string instrument, neither too loose nor too tight. And from this position, I would invite you to imagine, it's actually good to do as a daily practice, or as often as you can. Imagine that you are dying, that you know you only have maybe a few days or maybe only a few hours left. You know your body is failing, your life has come to an end. There's nothing you can do about it. Hold it lightly, hold it lightly. It's only an imagination now. But it's useful to practice because one day, for sure, this moment will come. So it's good to be prepared. Because when you're prepared, this is the greatest moment of your life. This is the greatest chance. Because if you're able to let go of your body, of your family, of your home, your possessions, then this is a very big chance to recognize the nature of your mind and to be free of the endless wheel of rebirth. But before that, to be ready for that, just imagine it is really now. What would you, if it was really now, what would you regret? Is there maybe something, maybe there's somebody you're in an argument with your parents or some other, or good friends, and maybe you think, oh, I forgot, I wanted to tell my father or whoever how much I love them or that I forgive them. And if you realize that now, go and do it. Don't procrastinate. We could die any moment. And then imagine how nice it would be also to be free of all the worries. Maybe you realize that all the things you're worried about, how am I going to make money and how I'm going to do the details of this next project, if you could just realize, well, too late now. It's no longer important. It's not going to happen. And just let go. What a relief. And at this moment, what is really important? And you will come to realize that what is really important is how much you are able to be in this space, in the nature of your mind, in this oneness in which there is no life and no death and no separation. Yeah, so rest in that as good as you can. And then return to this body in this moment that is very much alive and will probably stay so for another few hours, another few days, maybe years. And then return to this conversation at the IEC Online. Yeah, and then we would like to open for questions. I don't know, Heidi, were there any questions written into the chat? I don't think there was much. So
there were a lot of comments, but we have a hand raised by Bo.
I'm not sure how well I'll be to formulate this question, but I'm going to try. So you've both spoken a lot about ultimately there's only undivided consciousness, all this kind of linear time is an illusion and all of that. But at the same time, we're in linear time, wars, horror, you spoke a lot about trauma and violence and all that stuff. And then there is you mentioned, Viktoria, the four different kind of levels, I suppose, or ways of thinking about what actually reincarnates. And you mentioned like people come into therapy with these different experiences, and some people have an experience of ego reincarnation. And Hanna, you kind of talked about your own experiences where you feel like you've already known someone. And so And then ultimately, it's just, you end it with, there's just a single unbroken consciousness. So it's the past lives of the cosmic consciousness or something like that, you said. I'm just wondering how that relates, how, I mean, I know you probably won't have a single line answer to this question, but just something about how and also our own evolution of understanding this, like we're in this evolution of our own consciousness, so we can maybe be in multiple places at once. Like obviously, like Hanna, in your own meditation, you know, you kind of, we were both in the kind of very basic, practical, this is our lives, we need to say goodbye to our father before we die from this body, but at the same time being aware of ultimately there is no life, there is no death. Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, this is also actually an FAQ. What is it if there is no soul? I almost lost a student one time out of my study program because I said there's no soul in Buddhism. But it depends very much how you define it. It depends very much on definition. So a lot of Buddhist philosophy, which I have also studied, is about defining. What do you mean by self? What do you mean by soul? So if you mean the soul, like the heart feeling, then of course it's there because you experience it. And so it's very important when we're trying to make sense of things, we have to use words. And words are necessarily in dualistic thinking. So it's either that or the other. I am boundless consciousness or I am an individual being. And either time exists or it doesn't exist. But the trouble is, the truth is always free from these extremes. One of my favorite sayings, I don't even know where it's from, it's if it's not paradoxical, it's not true. So we can train our mind, we can use Buddhist philosophy by training in seeing things from different perspectives. And Ken Wilber has taken a lot of his upper left teachings from Buddhism. Because the science of the mind was very, very refined through the stages of emptiness, and then also the explanations to that question, who or what is reborn, is very different depending on where you're at, depending on your experience. So I liked it. So in a big call like this, there is not really one answer I can give, except study your mind and keep asking that question, keep asking. I would give you a different answer if we were one-to-one, because then we would probably go into a meditation together and then I would suggest certain things and you would answer me. We could have a relational conversation, and then I would find out, why do you want to know? You know, is it just entertainment, like Viktoria was saying? Would it just be nice to know? Or do you just want to philosophize about other beings in other universes? Or do you want to know what's the next step for me? Or how can I deal with this problem I have? Or how can I overcome my fear of death? Or whatever, you know. So I don't know if that helps. Or I don't know if Viktoria, you want to say something?
What I heard out of those questions is basically the issue of there are different states of the mind, and the way we look at things depends on those states. I think this is a very important point when it comes to discussion of past lives. Let me give an example. There have been documented cases when people go in a hypnotic regression into what you would call the bardo state, in between two life states. And then people in those states perceive that before the soul, the consciousness, whatever you want to call it, was born into this life, made, let's say, a soul contract with the future family, that they are going to give each other a particular experience that may not be good, but it will be a good learning experience. And these cases have been published And out of that came sort of dogma that whatever we are experiencing in this life is pre-planned, so you agree to whatever happens here. This is an extremely dangerous notion, because if you can imagine that if you have someone in therapy who has suffered an abusive alcoholic father beating her, and you try to bring that notion close that, oh, you agree, that was all your planning, that is all your choice, you are re-traumatizing that person, you are actually shooting into your own or the client's own leg. Because this is a serious mixing up of different states and different versions of different projections of reality in different states of the mind, if that makes sense. So I'm very happy that this question came up, because I think it's important to bring into the discussion that the interpretation of different states is very critical and very difficult. When you look at the research done by Raymond Moody, he says that essentially the near-death experience, which also of course implies the bardo state, is ineffable. There's no way that you can talk about it in the present state of mind. So whatever you're talking about it, whether you're starting to talk about a soul contract, whether you're starting to talk about pre-planning life, is not accurate. Per definition, it isn't, because it's narrowing down a reality that we do not have access to the present state. So I'm just saying usefulness, we can use the criteria of usefulness very well here. If something is therapeutically useful and beneficial, we can adopt it. If it's not, then we have to be careful what sort of interpretation we are choosing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. Great.
There's another one by Marie Claire, and she said, I would like to know your ideas about how past lives mix with transgenerational ghosts.
Transgenerational ghosts. Is the question, what are ghosts?
Yes, if we work with a family tree, you find patterns in ancestors, that part of your ancestors in you, on one hand, and also your past lives in you. So I would like to know how you can imagine both get together, or both influence us.
That's probably more for Viktoria then.
Yes, in therapy, the way I would deal with that is that they all fall under this group. I mentioned this word before, the condensed experiences of Stanislav Grof, if you're familiar with that. So it's the idea that when we have a pattern in our psyche, that pattern tends to manifest in different experiences. So if you have a pattern that once you work with it, then you're likely to get it as a past life pattern. You're likely to get it as a transgenerational ghost in your own biological family. You tend to get it in dreams. You tend to get it in psychedelic experiences, and you tend to get it in everyday life. So there can be parallels, and I would work with it as such.
Okay, so we go on to another question of Ariel. How can the knowledge and practice in working with past lives be helpful for the work in world in transition?
I can explain what my question is coming from. I know how to, I am working with, I'm doing Qigong healing and teaching Qigong healing. So I work with all these kind of energies, but only for individual clients. And I thought in the context of the Integral European Conference, in context of the current world in transition with the COVID virus, I thought it might be nice to co-create an idea about how these past lives can be, and working with them can be helpful bring the whole world, to work with the whole world, so to say, to bring the whole whole of humanity and Earth one step further.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that because I haven't got a clue. I don't have a ready-made answer for that. And I'm just realizing it's a wonderful question. And I think this is why I'm in the integral movement on top of my tradition, so that I can draw from the tradition, which are per definition are things that have always worked, that are still fresh. I mean, I always, as a Buddhist teacher, you always say, oh, well, these teachings by the Buddha are have worked for 2,500 years, and they still do, which they do in a lot of cases and for a lot of stages. And but right now, this has never happened before. You know, a lot of Otto said that, and so I don't know. You know, I don't know if maybe one thing I can think of is that, in a way, it would be a relief that I've lived before and I will live again, if not on this planet, then on another, if not in this universe, then in another, if not in this space-time continuum, then in another. So there's not this, I think a lot of people suffer a lot more than we do as Buddhists, because this life is the only life they have. You know, like there's no planet B, and then it becomes very desperate and it becomes very unworkable. So my background helps me to see things in perspective and to say, well, yes, it's, I mean, on one hand, this has never happened before, and I really truly believe that, especially this situation now with this global crisis all over the world and this lockdown and behavior patterns that we would never have imagined possible. But at the same time, it's just one way of seeing it. So I don't know if that helps. Viktoria.
Yes, I quite agree with Hanna to say that there is no answer to this question, because I think the experiment or the work hasn't been done yet, like a lot in past life regression. It's not an explored territory. It's not something that has been exploited. So we know very little of how we could move this work into the we space and into a global space. But there is one experiment I would like to mention that is very interesting here. It's documented by Chet Snow, and the book is called Masterings of the Future. And if I remember correctly, the experiment has been done in the 70s. And the setting was following hundreds of people willing to undergo hypnotic regression. And I will put the reference into the chat afterwards, so you will see the title and the name. And the conductor of the experiment at Snow was asking the question of, is there a pattern? Yeah, if I put 500, 600 people into future life progression, can I see a pattern of what kind of future does unfold for humanity? And does that say about our collective subconscious? I don't think he wanted to look into the crystal ball either to see what the future is, but what he wanted to do is to see where we are heading from our subconscious material. And what was interesting, that yes, there was a pattern, but not one pattern, but 2 or 3. And almost all of these cases were falling into 1 or 2 of these categories, and the one possible future was a very industrialized, dirty, in a sense of polluted. So you have to imagine they had, I think, cities covered. So they had artificial air so that they could breathe, a lot of illness, a lot of fear, a lot of paranoia, very COVIDy. And the other future that is so is that people return to nature and they develop certain interconnectedness among themselves that is bringing them in completely different reality than the others, and they seem to coexist. Now, I don't want to comment on what this means and how we should interpret the data, but if someone is interested in that sort of thing, I would recommend that book. And one thing I would also add, if you're interested in thinking in those terms, I never conduct group sessions of past lives or future lives, and the reason why I don't do that because I don't know what sort of interferences are happening. So when people are seeing similar futures or similar paths, I don't know whether that is because there is a similar past or a similar future, or because the field is interacting and people are just picking up on each other's thoughts or in each other's morphogenetic field. I don't know. So it's a very interesting topic, and we truly don't know anything about it. I think that's the right answer. Thank you.
And if not, I would proceed and thank you all very much, Hanna and Viktoria. It was again enlightening. Oh, and you see popping up already the poll. Please take some time to fill it in. You know that there is the Facebook group, and I hope it will still stay alive after this conference and that we can connect there, because I personally have the problem how to find the people I wanted to meet. And I met some time, but I didn't know how to reach them. So maybe if everybody of us goes on Facebook into this group and posted something, so we could connect there. Yeah, and then thank you very, very, very much, and for your bearing also the bad audio. Unfortunately, Viktoria, sometimes I could hardly understand. I had to see your lips, but it's technology, the good parts and the bad parts of technology. But let's be grateful that we can be together in this way. That's really a good thing. And thank you also, Carmen, for your all the time helping these sessions to go smoothly.